There is a number that almost nobody gets right when they think about Walt Disney. Not the number of films he made, not the number of awards he won, not even the size of the empire he left behind. The number that matters most is the one on the probate document filed the week after he died, and it is shockingly, almost insultingly small. Walt Disney, the man who invented the modern entertainment industry, died with an estate valued at around $23 million. That is it. No hidden vaults, no secret billions. Just $23 million, and a company that would one day be worth more than 160 billion. So what happened to the rest of it? Where does a man who built the most recognizable brand on earth actually put his wealth? And what does it tell us about the difference between being rich and being powerful? To understand the answer, you have to go back to the beginning, to a young man with $5 in his pocket stepping off a train in Los Angeles, convinced that the next idea would be the one that changed everything. Walt Disney was born in Chicago in 1901. He grew up in small towns in Missouri and Kansas, drawing compulsively on whatever paper he could find. By his early 20s, he had already started and lost one animation company. His Laugh-O-Gram studio in Kansas City went bankrupt in 1923, leaving him nearly penniless. Most people would have stopped there. Walt did not stop. He packed what little he had and moved to Hollywood, chasing a version of the movie business that did not yet exist. The studio he started with his brother Roy began with $3,200. To put that in perspective, $3,200 in 1923 is roughly $55,000 today. Not nothing, but not much. For two brothers trying to build a film company from scratch, it was an act of pure faith. Roy handled the money. Walt handled the ideas. That division of labor would define everything that followed, and it would shape, in ways neither brother fully understood yet, exactly how Walt Disney's wealth would be built and spent. For the first several years, the Disney Brothers cartoon studio survived on contracts, short animated films sold to distributors who took the lion's share of the profits. Walt was making cartoons, but he was not getting rich. The business model kept him working, but it was not building wealth. That changed on a single night in November of 1928. Steamboat Willie premiered in New York City, and for the first time, audiences heard a cartoon character make noise. Mickey Mouse did not just move across the screen. He whistled, he laughed, he played music in perfect sync with the animation. Audiences were transfixed. Mickey Mouse became a cultural sensation almost overnight, and Walt Disney understood immediately what he had. He had not just made a cartoon. He had created intellectual property, a character, a personality, a brand that could be sold, licensed, and reproduced endlessly. Intellectual property is simply the legal right to control how a creative work or character is used by others. When a company sells the right to put Mickey Mouse on a lunchbox or a t-shirt, they are licensing that intellectual property and collecting a fee every single time. By the early 1930s, Disney's licensing operation was generating millions of dollars annually. Mickey Mouse appeared on watches, toys, books, clothing, and school supplies. This was not a side business. During the Great Depression, character licensing kept Walt Disney solvent. He was learning something that most of his competitors never fully grasped. The real money was not in making the thing, it was in owning the thing, and Walt was determined to own everything he touched. But Walt did not let that money sit still. He reinvested almost everything back into the studio, into technology, into the next impossible project. By 1937, that project was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the first full-length animated feature film ever made in the United States. Critics called it Disney's folly. The press was certain that no audience would sit through a feature-length cartoon, and that Walt Disney was about to destroy everything he had built. The word folly was not an exaggeration. It was the consensus opinion of the entire industry. Snow White premiered on December 21, 1937. Audiences did not just tolerate it, they wept, they cheered, they came back again and again. Adjusted for inflation, Snow White has earned over $418 million worldwide. It was, at the time of its release, the highest grossing sound film in history. Snow White did not just make Walt Disney wealthy, it transformed the studio's ambitions entirely. The profits funded a new campus, new technology, and a decade of animated features. But Walt never truly became liquid. Every dollar that came in went toward the next thing. Bambi, Fantasia, Cinderella. Each one was a massive financial bet, and each one either paid off or required creative refinancing to survive. This is the pattern that defines Walt Disney's financial life. He was never a man who accumulated wealth in the traditional sense. He was a man who converted wealth into projects, and projects into more wealth, and then converted that back into even more ambitious projects. By the 1940s, the studio was genuinely profitable, but the war disrupted everything. The studio pivoted to government training films and military contracts, which kept the staff employed but produced almost no artistic legacy and very little profit. Walt came out of those years restless and frustrated. He needed a new canvas. That canvas turned out to be something nobody in the entertainment business had ever tried before: a theme park. In the early 1950s, Walt Disney began developing what would become Disneyland, and almost everyone around him thought he had lost his mind. His own brother Roy thought the idea was too risky. The studio's board of directors was skeptical. Walt's response was to find the money himself, which meant doing something remarkable. He mortgaged his own house and borrowed against his personal pension to help finance the project. To build Disneyland, Walt also made a deal he would later come to resent. He brought in ABC as a financial partner. The network invested $500,000 and provided $4.5 million in loan guarantees in exchange for a 35% stake in the park. Walt needed the money. He took the deal. Disneyland cost approximately $17 million to build. It opened on July 17, 1955. And it was, by any measure, a catastrophe on opening day. The asphalt was fresh, and women's heels sank into it. Fountains ran dry because a plumber's strike had forced a choice between drinking water and working restrooms. Walt stood in the park he had mortgaged his house to build and watched it fall apart in real time. And then, almost miraculously, people kept coming. Within the first year, Disneyland had welcomed over 3.5 million visitors. The park was profitable almost immediately, and it changed the financial trajectory of Walt Disney's life more than any film ever had. Because a film plays for a few months, and then it is over. But a theme park keeps collecting tickets every single day. Disneyland was the moment Walt Disney stopped being a filmmaker who was also kind of wealthy and became something closer to an institution. The park generated recurring revenue, income that arrived steadily day after day, regardless of whether Walt had a new movie in production. In financial terms, this is the difference between a one-time payment and a royalty stream. And royalty streams are how lasting fortunes are built. By the early 1960s, Walt Disney owned approximately 14 to 15% of the Walt Disney Company, a stake that gave him both enormous influence and real, tangible wealth. The company's stock had been rising steadily. The park was thriving. The television show was a ratings success. And Walt was already planning the next impossible project, an entire experimental city in Florida. He called it Epcot, the experimental prototype community of tomorrow. He envisioned it not as a theme park, but as an actual functioning city, a living laboratory for urban planning. Walt Disney was not thinking about retirement. He was thinking about the future of human civilization. He never got to build it. In December of 1966, Walt Disney was admitted to St. Joseph Hospital in Burbank, California. He had been diagnosed with lung cancer earlier that year. He died on December 15, 1966, just 10 days after his 65th birthday. Walt Disney died at the age of 65, which means he spent his entire adult life building something and never had a single year of genuine rest at the top of it. The next project was always already underway. When the probate documents were filed, the estate was officially valued at approximately $23 million, and here is why that number was so low. Probate value reflects the assets a person directly holds at the moment of death: cash, property, personal stock. It does not capture the compound future value of the institution they created. By a broader estimate, Walt Disney's true economic influence at the time of his death was closer to $100 to $150 million, roughly equivalent to $1 billion in purchasing power today. That is genuinely wealthy. But it is not the dynasty-level fortune that the scale of his creation might suggest. Here is the reason. Walt Disney kept spending. Every time the balance grew, he deployed it. He trusted the next dream more than he trusted the bank account. The Walt Disney Company that exists today is worth somewhere between $160 and $170 billion. It owns studios, streaming platforms, theme parks on multiple continents, and some of the most powerful intellectual properties ever created, including franchises Walt never lived to see. To put the full span of it in perspective, Walt Disney started with $3,200. The company that began with that amount is now valued at more than 50 million times that figure, and yet he died without $1 billion to his name. Go back to that probate document. $23 million on a sheet of paper filed in a Burbank courthouse in the winter of 1966. That number is not the measure of Walt Disney's wealth. It is the measure of how completely he converted everything he earned into everything he imagined. The real fortune was never in the account. It was always in what came next.